Good evening. I'm Rebecca Hoogs, and I have the enormous pleasure of serving as the executive editor of Seattle Arts and Lectures. Welcome to an evening with Ross Gay. Tonight's free event would not have been possible without our co-presenter and partner in all ways, the Marguerite Casey Foundation. Can we give them a huge round of applause for their support? As we begin, I want to acknowledge that wherever you are joining us from, we are all on unceded lands of Indigenous people. Here in Seattle, we stand on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Duwamish, Suquamish, Stillaguamish, and Muckleshoot people. We recognize the stewardship of this land where we now live and work, and the disruption of their care by colonization. We are grateful for their continued stewardship of these lands. At SAL, we are committed to supporting and building relationships with Native communities through real action, connecting with the Duwamish tribe through Real Rent Duwamish, and learning about, featuring, and sharing the work of Indigenous writers and thinkers. To learn more about our work in this area and SAL's commitment to racial equity, please visit lectures.org/about. If you are joining us in person, welcome. Thank you for coming out. And if you are one of the more than 800 households joining online tonight, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. You are also an important part of tonight's story. Our tagline for this year is simple: you belong here. And we mean it. Wherever you are, whoever you are, you belong at SAL. Our huge thanks go to the many partners who have made this evening possible. Thanks to our season presenting sponsor, the Seattle Times. Thank you to our co-presenter, the Marguerite Casey Foundation. Thank you to our bookseller, Open Books. Thank you to our organizational supporters, all of whom are thanked on our website. And special thanks for major support of our programs goes to Amazon, the Amazon Literary Partnership, Arts Fund, the City of Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, the Echo Fund, the Four Seasons Seattle, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Washington State Arts Commission. Thanks to our community partners for this event, Crab Creek Review and Pongo Poetry Project. Thank you to our board, our volunteers, and our small but mighty staff of 12 who make all of our programs possible. And finally, thanks to all of you for being here for tonight, for believing in the transformative power of books, writers, and joy. Can we have a round of applause for all of our supporters? The format for this evening will be a reading by Ross Gay, followed by a Q&A, which Dr. Carmen Rojas will moderate. Dr. Carmen Rojas is the president and CEO of the Marguerite Casey Foundation. Prior to joining the Marguerite Casey Foundation, Dr. Rojas was the co-founder and former CEO of the Workers Lab, an innovation lab focused on making real the promises of safety, dignity, and mobility to all working people. For more than 20 years, Carmen has worked with foundations, financial institutions, and nonprofits to improve the lives of working people across the United States. Whether you are watching in person or online, you can submit a question for the conversation by going to slido.com and entering the code Inciting Joy. You can also vote your favorite questions to the top. The Slido access information is also in the pre-event email, which was sent to all ticket holders. If you need any technical support during the event, you can email us at boxoffice@lectures.org. And if you're posting about this evening on social media, we hope you'll tag us and use the hashtag Inciting Joy. You know that we always begin our events with a reading by a writer from our Writers in the Schools or Youth Poet Laureate programs. Tonight's writer is Ainsley Workman from Ballard High School, and here to introduce them is their writer-in-residence, Rachel Kessler. Please join me in welcoming Ainsley Workman and Rachel Kessler.
Good evening. I am delighted to introduce you to Ainsley Workman. I first met Ainsley when they were a junior at Ballard High School in the throes of the lockdown, when we were all trying to figure out how to do school online. And I am extremely unslick with Zoom and Teams and whatever. And most of my students at that time had their cameras off, understandably. So I got to know Ainsley on the page through their intriguing, engaging poems. The following year, I was in a classroom with live humans in real life, seniors at Ballard High School, who were all carrying so much after being stuck in isolation for 2 years. And then a student in the front row commented on a poem that we were studying, and I had this feeling like I already knew them. There was something familiar in their words, but these were all new students to me. Later, I read a poem that they had written, pouring out the emotional turmoil and joy in the awkwardness of being alive right now in a human body, and realized I did know this young writer, but through text only. Now I had the pleasure of hearing their voice and meeting them in person. It was then that I realized I'd recycled my lesson plans, and Ainsley, the worst, I know. Ainsley had already written this, used this same prompt to write a poem. Lucky for us, Ainsley kept on looking out the window year after year and saw something different in this poem, The Coolness of the Glass.
Hi, guys. The coolness of the glass. From here, I see nothing. There is nothing here. There is not sky or soft curling clouds. There is no place where the sand becomes sea. From here, I hear nothing. There is not gentle conversation. There is no snapping of branches. What a thing to be standing at a window and seeing out, and beyond the solid wall that keeps the window's place. What a sensation to feel the coolness of glass against your forehead, as you push, as you fog up the glass with breath, as you leave greasy fingerprints. From here, I leave nothing. From here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ainsley. It is now my immense pleasure to introduce Ross Gay. We have been big fans of Ross Gay since before he first visited SAL for our poetry series in 2017. He's the author of 4 books of poetry, Against Which, Bringing the Shovel Down, Be Holding, and Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude, which won the 2015 National Book Critics Circle Award and the 2016 Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award. That evening in 2017, his poetry reading included pieces from the Book of Delights, which was released in 2019 and was an instant New York Times bestseller, and which maybe also just shows you that poetry and essays have more in common than not. And maybe we should overthrow the whole idea of genre categories altogether, since they're just separating us from each other in writing that we might love. But I digress. Ross's new collection of essays, Inciting Joy, was released this past fall. I started to read the book on a plane and panicked when I realized that I didn't have a pen on me. Now, I don't read without a pen in hand to know what I love, to be in conversation, to ask questions, but I persevered, digging a lipstick out of my bag and deciding that I could mark the moments that I wanted to remember this way. And in this way, I kissed almost every page of the book. But here's the thing. This lipstick wasn't really a lipstick, but was one of those multi-sticks. Good for the lips, the cheeks, the eyes, anywhere you want some color, some softness, some attention. Much like Ross's work, these essays are multi-purpose, can be applied as needed to the heart, the head. Carry this book everywhere, and it will be with you when you need it, however you need it. I began this book on a plane and ended it in a water park, where my kid was joyfully celebrating their 10th birthday. What happens, Ross asks in the book, what happens when our care for one another is motivated not by what we hate or fear in common, by what in common we love? Reader, I laughed and cried, my face a water park of tears, as this book gave me ways to understand and feel that question. So Seattle and beyond, please put your hands together, please drop some love in the chat to welcome our doula of joy, our gardener of change, our coach of care, Ross Gay.
Hello, everyone. That lipstick situation, that's amazing. Oh my God, brilliant. So good to see you. Ainsley, amazing poem too. We visited a school earlier in the day, and it's just like, you know, it's so fun to see these brilliant young people doing their thing. So I'm going to read a little bit. I'm going to read the last essay in this book. And I just sort of, you know, I'm going to read it regardless of what you say, but I'm sort of like, are you ready for something kind of tough, you know? Okay. Okay. Because if you weren't, like I said, it's like, all right, sorry. So for those of you who don't know the book yet, it's basically, 14 essays where I sort of I consider these I don't know if you call them like practices, maybe you'd call them practices in which I'm learning the language actually after the book has come out, perfect timing, where we practice our entanglement, you know, places, practices, events, rituals where our fundamental belonging to one another gets practiced. So I have an essay about pickup basketball. I have an essay about gardening. I have an essay about school. I have an essay about cover songs. And whoever did the music, God damn, it was so good. Well done, Lord. And then this essay is about gratitude. And it's called, Oh, My Heart. Gratitude, the fourth incitement. And there's an epigraph that starts the essay, and it's by the poet Cornelius Eady from his poem Gratitude. And it says, I'm a brick in a house that is being built around your house. Oh, my heart. Gratitude, the 14th incitement. Given that I have already blathered on enough about gratitude elsewhere, there's a long parenthetical here, so hang on with me. Given as I have already blathered on enough about gratitude elsewhere, truth be told, in my book, by which I mean in my opinion, there is no blathering on enough about gratitude. The real thing, I mean. There is no enough to gratitude. And it does not in the least seem an ill-conceived exercise, devotion, project, life, to do nothing other than list or, catalog said gratitudes. Perhaps starting with the interior of what before your devotional, your practice, you considered your body. But now because you are thanking the trillion or so microbes in your gut and creepy crawling your skin and slathering lasciviously through your mouth and eyeballs and nostrils, critters, some of whom, if they get ill and die off, you will be a goner in a heartbeat, invisible EMTs, you might start there. That is a trillion gratitudes. That ought to keep you busy. Or, my God, who shouts out skin anymore? I don't mean the luster or hue, all of which are gobsmackingly stunning, and that those hues change most often in relation to the sun, that our skin is one of the many evidences that we are directly related to the sunflower and other heliotropic critters. Gobsmack. I mean the simple fact of our skin, an envelope or satchel to hold our guts in, and how it changes and becomes an archive or repository of those changes. Mine variously stretch-marked, pocked, dimpled, flappy, hairy, scarred, grooved, smooth, sagging, of different hues, and, as yet dear unacknowledged accomplice, holding my guts in. The eyelash. Good Lord, high five to that. Saliva. No. Or you do your job, whatever it is, thank you. Ear hairs, too, more prominent by the day, I notice. And this knee, like a pepper grinder, but still bending, still not chalk. We can carry on with the body like this, inside, which, even if it is broken beyond repair, probably, though not necessarily, there is a rectum and an anus to let this shit out, which either way constitutes a gratitude. There is tubing in there we do not know and maybe do not want to, but that might like to know we are grateful. Thank you, stank tubing in there. This is just the body we're talking about, and we haven't even begun. I mean, mammals have hair, which, though the source of much consternation and prohibition and hand-wringing, is actually an astonishment. And I've been the lucky recipient of so much simple creaturely tending because of it, dozing off in between the legs of some dear braider, tugging the strands tight. Teeth, the gums that hold them in your mouth, you have to be kidding me. Fingernails. If you got a nose, and even if that nose is perpetually stuffed or busted by a rogue elbow, it might one day, who knows, drag you to a lily that smells precisely like your mother who is getting old. And if you got toes, whether crooked or not, we can go out from the body, gradually like this, to the furthest reaches of our imaginations, gratituding the world, garlanding the world with gratitude, an hour a day a week a year. We could do it always and forever and never arrive at the last gratitude. We could never do it enough. Let's try. Let's start today, shall we? End parentheses. I want to keep this one quick. Periodically, I will catch wind of a response to my work, though I do everything I can to avoid being downwind of such things. Social media, they call it, though from what I hear, it seems sometimes antisocial and carcinogenic. That is something along the lines of, as Hanif Abdurraqib has written beautifully about, a white woman at a reading of mine saying something like, "How can a black man write about flowers at a time like this?" To which I know I should just wave my hand in front of my face like there's a gnat buzzing around, or pretend the gnat isn't there. But my first response is actually something along the lines of, you need to grow up if you think it's not always a time like this. And you need to shut up if you think you know what this black man or anyone ought to be writing right now. Grow up and shut up. But I try to know better than to spend time on that question, which is not a question at all. It's a shackle. It's a cell. But this other one I do want to spend a little more time with. Someone mentioned to me some post or tweet or whatever that was something along the lines of, any grown black poet talking about gratitude, I forget the rest, but it was approximate. I forget the rest, but it was approximately, must have his pea-brained head up his own nasty ass. Somehow I gathered this commentator was black, and they were talking about me. My first response was kind of self-protective or defensive. It hurt my feelings, I'm saying, though I know I shouldn't say so. I was like, hand on chest, ouch, my heart. And my second response, sympathetic to the heartbreak and rage from which the tweet was launched, footnote, a lot of footnotes in this book. Are tweets launched? I understand, too, or at least I get the impression, have heard, that tweets are often discharged like machine gun fire, that there is not always the same kind of revised, refined, contemplative, considered comportment of something like, well, what you are currently reading. I get that. And my second response, sympathetic to the heartbreak and rage from which the tweet was launched, was the same. Ouch, my heart. Anyway, it is to ouch my heart that this brief meditation, and probably too, this whole book is addressed. It is true that we are often implored or compelled, especially by institutions that have the power to kill us, by which I mean the power to withhold the resources for life and the power to exterminate us, to be grateful. The very most obvious is something along the lines of, you should just be grateful you have a job here. Or you should just be grateful we let you in. Or you should just be grateful you have any health insurance. Or you should just be grateful the incinerator is not next door. Or you should just be grateful you have a roof over your head at all. Or you should just be grateful it only definitively causes 3 types of cancer. Or you should just be grateful we didn't log all the trees. Or you should just be grateful it seems to move out of the soil in a generation or 2. Or you should just be grateful we put up a sound barrier on the highway we ran through your neighborhood. Or you should just be grateful they aren't all extinct. Or you should just be grateful we didn't take everything. Or you should just be grateful they make inhalers for that. Or you should just be grateful there's a shot. Or you should just be grateful we're not suing you. Or you should just be grateful it wasn't worse. Or you should just be grateful we let you sleep under that bridge. Or you should just be grateful we have a treatment for those comorbidities we gave you. Or you should just be grateful that after we occupied your territory, we let you stay living there on the outskirts. Or you should just be grateful that after we took your neighborhood, we still let you shop at the Whole Foods by Amazon. Or you should just be grateful we haven't yet patented that seed. Or you should just be grateful that we're delivering bottled water. Or you should just be grateful for the test kit. Or you should just be grateful for the gas mask. Or you should just be grateful for the boats we've left on the shore. You'll find in each one a small compartment with Band-Aids, bootstraps, antibiotics, water purifier, sunscreen, GPS, slicker, 1 spare telescoping oar, a coupon book, Ray-Bans, a fishing pole and camp stove, a boat repair kit, Leatherman and tar paper, Bill Gates' autobiography, the transcripts of all 800,000 TED Talks. Thank you. Thank you. Me too. Me too. A subscription to Forbes, a Tesla rechargeable reading light biometric monitor to keep you safe. We'll keep an eye on you. A Nike visor to the brim of which you can attach the aforementioned, and vitamin C tablets, the stores of which we will replenish monthly by helicopter. Just use the QR code. We won't charge you much. We'll keep a tab, for which, in case you forgot, you should just shut your fucking mouth and be grateful. And though today, riding my bike down a narrow one-way road and seeing the oncoming very big American truck, maroon and no shoulder or place for me to go, I thought, God, I hope this dude doesn't plow into me by murder or madness or accident. Having been for a time to time, wanting to drive my own car into things, usually other cars or trees or telephone poles or walls head on, not to hurt anyone or anything, but to quiet my hurting mind. I breathed an actual sigh of relief as the big extended mirror passed me by, the whoosh of which by my face flushed from my mouth the word, blessed, the way my friend Don used to always sing it, bringing forth with his big, sad smile the church ladies as he did so, blessed, or have a blessed day now. Like my Nana says, all right, baby, be blessed. It strikes me as an ancestral ethos. Hang on now. I was going to say that I felt blessed that dude didn't plow me, dude as human force that could kill me, dude as state or multinational corporation that would gladly plow through me for shareholder satisfaction, but also that I don't know if I'd call that blessedness gratitude, especially considering my own previous potentially collaterally homicidal ideation. But I think I probably would call it grace, every moment of escape. How many actual millions of them do we carry in the suitcases of our bodies? No, let's say the trees of our bodies, because grace shares a root. You see it there, don't you? With gratitude. Amazing. Yes, my favorite concert movie of all time is neither Dave Chappelle's Block Party nor Richard Pryor live on the Sunset Strip. It is Amazing Grace, the documentary of the making of Aretha Franklin's record of the same name. The movie and record, made incidentally within months of Nina Simone's live album Emergency Ward, features selections from Franklin's live performances, January 13th to 14th, 1972, at the New Temple Missionary Baptist Church in Los Angeles, supported by the Southern California Community Choir under the direction of Alexander Hamilton. I want to point you to the moment in the film, at the conclusion to the first night's performance, about 2/3 of the way through their rendition of Amazing Grace, during which the Reverend James Cleveland, convener, vocalist, and pianist, is spotted away from the choir and his piano with his head in his hands, crying, falling apart. And the choir, just like the audience, is moved every which way. And after Aretha has a quick rest, sits and wipes her face some, and the Reverend recovers and puts his jacket back on and returns to his post, guiding the choir in their sturdy, buffeted, shouted harmonies, which, to draw Aretha to her feet and back to the podium. Safe, safe, safe. So safe, she responds. So safe with Jesus, Aretha sings. And it's grace, you might know the song, you might sing along, that will lead me home. And in a miracle of footage, as though to anticipate our reflex to designate Franklin a singular talent, a distinguished genius, a solitary voice, as though to anticipate our desire to never mind the choir and never mind the organist and the band and never mind the Reverend James Cleveland and never mind the parishioners and never mind the goddamn lyrics to the song and never mind all her teachers and guides and elders, never mind who came before her or swept the stage or fixed the lights or tuned the piano or made the tea or cooked or grew the food that fed her mother's 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 mother. Never mind her mother's 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 mother. Never mind all by which she is even standing before us in the first place. Grace, through her sung as it had never been before, amazing. We behold that the Reverend James Cleveland, who has come to stand next to her at the podium, has his hand wrapped in the back of her dress as though he is holding her up. I mean, he is holding her up. And Aretha Franklin is holding his hand, holding her up as though she is holding him up. I mean, she is holding him up. They are holding each other up. The grace of footage lets us behold how they be holding each other up. How we be holding each other up. And as she unfurls another melismatic amazing, his mouth moves with hers. And though they aren't indistinguishable from one another, neither are they separate. And that miracle of footage, that glimpse of microcosmic holding, points to the macrocosmic holding, of which, if it isn't yet plain, I beg you to listen again, watch again. Ms. Aretha Franklin's voice is simply the beautiful evidence. Or another way to put it, Aretha Franklin's voice, quiet as it's kept, my favorite song on that album, the one that is on repeat in my head as I compose this, one of the songs I hope might accompany me as I walk out of this still pretty bouncy sack of bones, is Holy, Holy, the cover of the Marvin Gaye song. Is not only singing about, but it's evidence of grace, which is defined as God's unmerited favor, love, or help. What I called a macrocosmic holding, but we might also call gift. Although I know the dangers of reading the comments, not so much on these YouTube clips. And one of the more frequent and astute observations there is that Aretha Franklin was touched or carrying forth or channeling or the conveyor to us of a gift that, though it came through her, was not exactly hers. None of which, for the record, diminishes the labor, the practice, the time she spent. Let's not say spent. Let's say devoted. Let's say gave. Cultivating that gift. Or a better way to say it maybe is being grateful for that gift. Though there is certainly a discourse of diminishment, particularly among the gifting of black people, that would make it seem so. You know, white people work hard, black people are gifted. But ouch, my heart, I only barely want to acknowledge that because we're not talking about them. Them is the same them telling us what to write, what to think about, what to love. We're talking about Aretha Franklin, whose gifts or gratitude remind us of giftedness, remind us of gift. And gifts, as Robin Wall Kimmerer writes in Braiding Sweetgrass, from the earth or from each other establish a particular relationship, an obligation of sorts to give, to receive, and to reciprocate, end quote. Kimmerer recounts how as a child she would run through the fields when the wild strawberries would come on, getting on her stomach or back to receive the gift of the fruit, which came only for a short time and which gave of themselves so that she might have some sweetness. Or, she says, still learning patience and sometimes gobbling up the still white berries, sourness. She was learning from the strawberries that the earth and all bounty that comes from the earth, which is to say, isn't it ouch my heart, everything true, is a gift, which is a radically different notion than the one we are just barely surviving. Now, I'm talking about capitalism and settler colonialism and all the entangled brutalities and lies we are told are the truth and that we ought to be grateful for them. Kimmerer writes, the fundamental nature of gifts is that they move, and their value increases with their passage. The fields made a gift of strawberries to us, and we made a gift of them to our Father. The more something is shared, the greater its value becomes. This is hard to grasp for societies steeped in notions of private property, where others, we, are, by definition, excluded from sharing, end quote. And a few paragraphs later, she says, the essence of the gift is that it creates a set of relationships. The currency of a gift economy is, at its root, reciprocity. But the currency of the brutal economy is the opposite of reciprocity: theft, hoarding, dispossession, alienation. The brutal economy is a system of lies, a net of stories, a noose of agreements that turns whoever owns the most or signs the checks or holds the keys or wields the gavel or stamps the papers or has a spaceship, unless you're Sun Ra, into a god to whom, at least that's what they think because it's true, they are killing us, we should be grateful. In the theft economy, the gods might not give you a visa. They might put you in the street. They will for sure bust up your union. They can take you in if they want. They're putting sludge in the river. They're putting a pipeline through as we speak. They're doing everything they can to keep burning up the world. Given this, ouch, my heart, I understand the impulse directed a tad meanly at me, gotta say, but nah, we're cool. To be like, fuck gratitude. Or to be like, any grown black poet talking about gratitude, etc. I get it. I mean, I really get it. Let's take one horrible, though superb, example. Have you read Chris Manjapra's March 29th, 2018 article in The Guardian? In it, he tells how reparations were paid to... Wouldn't it be neat if she stepped through the thing and said, well, matter of fact, I did. Have you read Chris Manjapra's March 29th, 2018 article in The Guardian? In it, he tells how reparations were paid to England's white former enslavers and their descendants until about 2015, which is so absurd that it is almost impossible to hear. So I will say it again, a touch differently. When England unenslaved their enslaved population, it collected a tax from its citizens to pay white reparations to the former enslavers and their descendants. A tax which would have been paid, also by formerly enslaved people and their descendants. Which means, just want to be clear here, that the ancestors of the enslaved were paying the ancestors of the enslavers for letting their people go. Until 2015. Emancipation. Jubilee. As nuts as it sounds, I know you know, it's a dime a dozen. We will take your land, we will take your people, we will take your language, we will take your livelihood, we will take your everything, but yay, for those who slip through, here's your life, what's left of it. You won't recognize it, but you'll have to pay us for it anyway. And how about you show a little goddamn gratitude? It's called being grateful at the barrel of a gun, which you can't be. I mean, there is a monk out there who can be, but I ain't that monk. Nor should you be. Oh, my heart. That's not gratitude. That's being extorted. Footnote. T-shirt, keychain, etc. idea, maybe not for the goop set. Extorted. I was lucky enough to meet a couple of the winners of the 2013 Food Sovereignty Prize at Black Oak Center, a community resilience project outside of Kankakee, Illinois. One of the winners was from the Dessalines Brigade in Haiti, a peasant farmer as she called herself. And as one of the recipients of the prize, she was touring farming projects around the United States. I got there a few minutes late and joined the just departing tour of the property, the fields and beehives and herbal apothecary. There were about 15 of us, and eventually we arrived, after walking through a greenhouse, at a star-shaped plot planted in strawberries, herbs, and more. Our host, Dr. Jafunza Wright Carter, who, in addition to being one of the co-founders of Black Oaks, along with her husband, Fred, was Gwendolyn Brooks's primary care physician. Blessed. Grace. She told us we were at the ancestral garden, where all the visitors come when they arrive. It is here, Dr. J said, that we lay down the sorrows of slavery and colonialism and imperialism. It is here, she said, that together we lay our sorrows down, which we did, holding the hands of who was next to us. She didn't tell us this is one of the definitions of joy, holding each other through the sorrow, because she didn't have to. The strawberries and the lemon balm did that. We retreated in the kitchen, where we ate from an excellent potluck. These places, Black Oak, Soulfire Farm, the Bloomington Community Orchard, etc., as a rule, do the most badass potlucks. I remember soup and homemade bread and beans, and, as always, noting that the squash, potatoes, and kale came from the field. The thyme and rosemary, you saw them on your way in, right over there. Tony brought the green beans, and Gilbert brought the kombucha. It's called grace. It means gratitude. It's just how we do. It was chilly. We were huddled a little closer than if it wasn't. And for those of us not from the upper Midwest, it was freezing, as our Brazilian and Haitian friends noted a few times. But we just huddled and laughed and kept our mugs full of tea, lemon balm from the ancestral garden. Tiana brought the mint. We asked questions and told stories and took notes sometimes and sometimes not. The light changed in the room, the shadows on our faces. We spoke a few different languages: Creole, Portuguese, English, Spanish, French. So we were in one of those beautiful circuits of translation, relying on each other to understand each other, as always, again. Oh, my heart, it was during this conversation that I heard this powerful story about the Dessalines Brigade. Shortly after the 2010 earthquake in Haiti, itself a victim of upside-down reparations, itself a victim of centuries of fathomless plunder. Monsanto, seeing in this disaster a new market for their products, which includes, among other things, hybrid seeds, genetically modified seeds, and glyphosate, or Roundup, an herbicide so ubiquitous, sprayed on so many millions of acres that in addition to being on or in much of our food, it is in our water, it is probably in our bodies, delivered a gift of tons and tons of their hybrid seed to Haiti. It surely to some looked like a gesture of benevolence, largesse, the same way so much so-called aid does. Except that hybrid seed is not really viable for saving because it sometimes doesn't make seed, it sometimes makes sterile seed, and if it does make viable seed, that seed will likely not come true or be like its parent. Therefore, the farmers who used that seed would likely end up ensnared, having to buy their seed in the future from Monsanto, as opposed to saving it, as they had done, as we have done, as it's been done for us for millennia. That's to say, accepting this gift from Monsanto would also mean forsaking the gift of wisdom and care and love that is carried in the vault of their own seed, their own practices. Of course, those practices are precisely what Monsanto is hoping to erase, with practices of its own. And by erasing, we're talking about seed and practice, enslaving. Actually, I mean re-enslaving, which the Dessalines Brigade saw coming from miles away, like the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And so, in what to many seemed an act of wild ingratitude, from inside the rubble and the need, it was a party, a celebration. They burnt Monsanto's seed. I think I do not need to tell you, oh, my heart, that refusal, that fire, that party is what I mean by gratitude. Gratitude to who brought the seed, often under great duress, for us. Gratitude to the land, the earth, for giving and receiving the seed, often under great duress, for us. Gratitude to the water and the sun and the soil. What is the soil other than the trillion gratitudes? Who would germinate the seed for us. Gratitude to the pollinators who would bring forth the fruit, or the wind who would shiver the tassel for us. Gratitude to the trees who housed the creatures, made the shade, held the soil together, died and joined their bodies to the trillion gratitudes from which the seeds would grow again and again for us. Their refusal of the fake gift is a radical joining. And that joining, oh, my heart, is gratitude. Shortly before the food sovereignty folks had to be on their way to their next stop, as we were finishing our tea and dessert, I will never forget it as long as I live. A young black farmer asked the Haitian farmer from the Dessalines Brigade, who, remember, burnt the seeds, what they do when it's difficult, when times were hard and it was a challenge to keep going. She half smiled and looked into the corner, shivering there in her borrowed ski cap beneath her hoodie pulled up. Then she laughed, looked the young farmer in the eye, and she said, oh, my heart, we sing. That song, too, oh, my heart, through the difficulty, which is sometimes profound, inconceivable, as far as I'm concerned, is gratitude. It was taught to us, given to us, grace, amazing, by our ancestors, some of whom survived the unsurvivable, endured the unendurable, and some of whom did not. That song was given to us by our ancestors, those who lived and those who died, who they said were property, and whose life was a refusal, a disowning, an insurgent gratitude. Our fleeting bodies, oh my heart, the flowers of that insurgence, and we replant that insurgent gratitude by saving the seeds we have been given and giving them away. I think that's what the writer Toy Derricott means in her poem, The Telecycle, when she says that, quote, joy is an act of resistance. The luminous mycelial tethers between us, our fundamental connection to one another, the raft through the sorrow, the holding through the grief joy is, reminds us again and again that we belong not to an institution or a party or a state or a market, but to each other. Needfully so, which we must practice and study and sing and story and dream and celebrate, belonging to each other as though our lives depended on it. And when we sing like that, oh, my heart, what then? Oh, my heart, it's a real question. My heart, what then? Thank you.
Can I give you a hug?
Oh, yeah.
I would love that.
Thank you.
Thank you. What a treat. What a real treat. Hi, y'all. Good evening. I come from a place where in a hi, y'all, or a good evening gets a call back. So I'm gonna, that may not be a Puget Sound thing, but we're gonna do a thing. Good evening. That's right. It is so wonderful to be here with you. Yeah, you too. I am a tremendous fan, and I'm gonna just do a bunch of my pre-words, which is we are likely to use a lot of bad words. I'm a cusser. I know you're a cusser. We're cusser cousins. A lot of references probably to 80s and 90s R&B, which are, it's like jams. If you got here earlier, whoever did the playlist should be a DJ on the side. It's fantastic work. I want to tell you a story about my mom before we get started. My mom is the second eldest of 17 kids and immigrated from a small town in Nicaragua. And her favorite movie when she immigrated was Charlotte's Web. And every time I read something you write, I imagine you as Charlotte. Tethering me with this beautiful web to your dad, to a basketball court, to a farm, to a cup of coffee. And I am so grateful. I'm really grateful to have this time with you. I am really proud to get to run an amazing organization here in Seattle called Marguerite Casey Foundation. We are a racial and economic justice foundation that's really focused on supporting leaders, scholars, and initiatives that are shifting the balance of power in society to those folks who've long been excluded from having it. And one of the things that I'm very proud that we get to do is be able to support people like you to come here and visit us. So thank you. I always prepare a list of questions, and then a bunch of things will happen in the moment of meeting somebody, and I'm like, man, what the fuck, man? I spent so much time on these questions. And I'm going to do my best both to have you all ask questions. So you should have a QR code that you can click on, and there will be a thing that you can do that I'm going to look at the exact instructions of right now. It's called the Slido, and the code is Inciting Joy. Rebecca told you all about this. Please feel free to ask questions. They will show up here, and I'll do my best job to be the Whoopi Goldberg of your guys' questions. And in the meantime, I'm going to ask you some of the questions that I have for you. I love this book so much, mostly because I think we imagine joy, and you talk about it, right, as like an immature feeling, untethered from all of these other feelings. And you set us up in this story, tethering joy with sorrow and solidarity. Why was that important to you?
You know, I just want to say, too, like, anyone who, like, doesn't do QR codes like me, don't do it. If you bring a piece of paper up here, I'll pick it up and give it to Carmen. You know? Just so you know.
Is that an AAA? Do you do like AAAA, B, 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 B?
Yeah, totally,
Is that how you said the text message?
Yeah.
Rasky, no wonder your thumbs look so strong.
I know.
I was going to ask you to do a thumb wrestling match, but I was like, man, those thumbs look like they do some activity.
Yeah, they're strong. They're strong. Okay.
Oh, you thought you were going to disrupt my Slido?
No, I know that it wasn't yours. So the question, you know, like, there's many reasons I was sort of thinking about, like, wanting to offer a kind of definition of joy. One is that I wrote a book called Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude, and then I had the Book of Delights. And so I was in the conversation, and I talk about this in the introduction of the book here. I was in a lot of conversations about, like, joy, like, what is joy? And I was thinking about, you know, many conversations that I had, and also conversations sometimes where this question, which was like, well, joy's not serious, that sort of thing, And I was eventually like, you're just talking about something different than I'm talking about. And sometimes I would be like, irritated or something. But mainly I was like, I think we're talking about something different. You're talking about like some ephemeral, some other experience that isn't joy. What I'm talking about is like the kind of abiding experience that is actually kind of permanently available, that maybe you fall into, that maybe maybe you're invited into or something, but something that is actually way more about as I say it in the intro to the book, something that happens when we recognize and are in the midst of practicing or doing, carrying the sorrow of whomever, when we're sharing the burdens of each other's sorrow. And the more I think about it, the more, like I said before I started reading, is more I think is like, actually, it's really, when I'm thinking about joy now, I think, maybe I'm thinking about like really these practices of entanglement. So the many, many practices by which we do not imagine ourselves separate from one another, but in fact, practice because we understand, or maybe because we don't understand, but through it we will come to understand better, that we are in fact fundamentally entangled. You know what I mean? So that's the thing, and like, the sort of naysayers of joy, the kind of, it's like, I get it. If you think I'm talking about, like, I got this awesome pink shirt for $2, it's awesome. That's awesome. It's such good news. But it's not the good news. It's not the best stuff. It's not what I'm talking about. And also, what I'm talking about is like, it's why when in joy we might find ourselves weeping. It's why funerals are places where joy resides, and everything else.
I'm going to go in between. I am really flexible. So if you do a paper situation, I will send Ross to get, we might do like a fight dance, like a dance battle on the way to get the question. But I'm going to start with the Slido, and there's a question from Melissa. There's an amazing incitement about a community garden. And she's asking, what is a non-negotiable for you in your own garden?
Does that person mean like, what do I always grow?
If you didn't grow it every year, it wouldn't feel like a proper Ross Gay garden.
Garlic is kind of like that.
Oh.
Yeah. We were real late on the garlic this year. We're late on it every year. And a little bit of me was like, oh, I wonder if this is the year we don't grow garlic. And then another part of me was like, hell no, it's not. You can't not grow garlic. So that feels like a non-negotiable. I always grow greens. It's going to be kale and collards and stuff like that. I kind of always grow potatoes, too. I think I always grow potatoes. It's funny, those might really be the ones, like the non-negotiables. That's a great
Thanks,
question.
Alyssa, for this question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I never thought of that.
With the QR code.
Yeah.
I'm gonna come with you left and right, brawler style on this QR code. Try and mess up little Rebecca's plan.
I'm gonna send the thing around where you can just hold it up against your head. Coming soon.
I read the book. I bought the book in Kentucky, signed by you. You'd done a reading. Not in Kentucky, in Tennessee, in Knoxville. You'd been there the week before, and I bought the book, and I read it, and then I listened to the audio book, and I cried really hard at the incitement of your dad. I cried reading it, and then when I heard you read it, my partner was calling me on FaceTime, and I was pulled over on the side of the road weeping, mostly because it was the greatest example of how messy being so deeply in love with somebody is. You're going to talk about your dad, I'm going to talk about my mom. My mom is an amazing woman. She's 3 feet tall, and I'm 7 feet tall. It's an amazing feat. But I was a bad kid. I was like, there were so many parts of this book that I was like, oh man, Ross and I would have been fucking up these streets. But she was a churchgoer. She loves church. She is a devout Catholic, and every Sunday she would make me go to church. And in my worst moment in high school, I still like viscerally remember she was like singing in church, and I just looked over her and I was like, you are just not a great singer. And it was literally, I can feel how horrible, like right now, I want to call her. I want to just like, and she doesn't remember this now. She doesn't remember anything about this moment. And reading the journey of the end of days for your dad, I wonder if you will share the joyful sorrow of that relationship with us.
Yeah, me and my dad had a deep, very deep, we were very close, but we like really had a difficult, we just had, it's like funny to think like how, in ways like how similar, it's so obvious. It's just like we were very similar in certain kind of ways. We were both very stubborn and this and that. We really didn't get along very good. And it was just like, he loved the hell out of me, and I loved the hell out of him, but I didn't really like him. And it was like that for years. And then as, like he died when I was 29. In my 20s, we got easier with each other. We got kind of started to thaw a little bit. And then he was diagnosed with cancer, and it was sort of like, I was available. And I was just with him then pretty much steadily, As I say in the book, in the essay, I say, I became his nurse. And they say, oh, no.
That's right.
I became his son.
That's right.
Yeah. And it was, it was sort of like one of these beautiful things where it's like, I was the one taking him to his treatments. I was the one taking him to this and that. My mom was working and terrified she was going to get, fired because she was the one with the insurance and, we don't have universal health care. And so she was just terrified, and I was taking care of my dad, and we never like broached subjects. We never were like,
Here's a note card.
Yeah. It was never like that. It was just like we were just hanging out, and it was so simple and uneventful and sweet and like lucky. Yeah, and devastating too, because my dad was like this, he was like this, kind of strong dude and like hearty and, all these things. And like, the beautiful thing of like becoming a sort of exuberantly needful, he needed us in a way that I had never seen, which is, that shake you up. But it was also like, it was such a gift to be able to sort of be in the midst of that need. Yeah, and it feels like one of the somethings of joy, to get to be with our beloveds as they're on their way,
I loved this line, and I loved hearing you read. I became his nurse. I became his son. I was his son, and you touch on your mom, and in another. I come from sort of a very materialist, ideological, left training, where things are said very explicitly, and critiques of white supremacy and capitalism and individualism are explicit. It's like the thing that it's like the cut to the throat, right? And throughout every essay, you are inviting us not in that way. It's like you're inviting us to dance into a rejection of individualism, to fall in love into a way of sort of a collective identity, a collective being. It feels so subversive to me, this book. It feels like I was sharing with Ross that I had a conversation with Robin Kelly, and we were both talking about our love for your writing. And for me, it's you are Charlotte, and are inviting us into it. And you talk about your mom and not being able to take time off, and working more, actually, trying to prove a point, actually, so they can't fire her, and offer us language which is the language of disprivilege. Will you share a little bit more?
Yeah, this in the middle of in the gardening essay, I sort of talk about gardening, and like and I just sort of talk about that way of being like, well, that's a privilege, gardening is a privilege, or whatever, and then I sort of basically like,
Kombucha.
Kombucha's a privilege.
That's what it was.
Yeah. Or all these things that are like, that when it boils down to it, it's sort of also like, and air that when you breathe it won't give you asthma is a privilege. And water that when you drink it, you won't get fucking brain damage is a privilege. And like the soil, when you walk on it barefoot, you won't be absorbing toxins is a privilege. And a school that's not falling apart is a privilege. We could go on, and it's sort of like, no, to not have clean water, drinkable water is a disprivilege. To not have clean air is a disprivilege. And there's some way that formulation feels like it's kind of like articulating something as a privilege constitutes a kind of action. Like we're a little bit like what we're talking. Like I can almost imagine myself as acting by virtue of saying that's a privilege, as opposed to sort of actually articulating what is the brutality. At which point the brutality then can be addressed. It seems to me.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's a kind of evasion actually of the brutality.
It's as if you, as an individual, can make a set of choices on your own, free from systems and structures, and sort of chart your own path forward without butting against anything, right? It gives you all the power as an individual, as opposed to what I think this book does really beautiful, is invite us to want to hold the most powerful amongst us accountable for a different way, for a different future. Thank you. What music is giving you life right now?
I haven't listened a lot because I've been kind of writing. I'm writing this next book of delights, and there's a handful. I write a lot about music, and I've been on that Aretha Franklin record a little bit still.
Can I actually say something about that movie? Yeah. Isn't it amazing how hot they seem in that church? Yeah. I feel like it is hot as fucking hell throughout that whole movie.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, from the moment she steps in, I was like, man, I just was thirsty the whole movie.
That's right. I forgot. And it's in January in California, huh? Yeah. That's hot. I'm listening to that a lot. Like just the other night, I was on like a long Maxwell riff. I do love Maxwell. And I actually like watching Maxwell age. It's interesting to me. I'm interested in our aging, and I hope you are too.
What about it?
Well, like a falsetto, like an amazing falsetto singer. Like if you've ever heard Maxwell sing in the that MTV Unplugged, where he covers Kate Bush's song, This Woman's Work. Yes, that. It's wild. It's so beautiful. It's just unbelievably beautiful. And then when he sings it now, it's just a different voice. It's still a beautiful voice, but it's a voice that's like 25 years older or something. And it sounds different. It sounds like it's more worn. It's more lived. It's more all these things. There's just something so moving to me about people's voices as they age. Maxwell, I'm listening to a lot of Maxwell. I've been listening to this group called The Books a little bit. I don't even know how you describe them, but they're neat. If we talk longer, I'd come up with some more people.
Great.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, what advice would you give to someone struggling to find their purpose to make sure that their purpose and passion align.
Oh God. I'm such a reluctant advice person. But I would say this thing, like I do feel this is a pretty interesting question, like what do you love? I think asking each other like what we love is actually a pretty useful and gathering up kind of question. But the other thing about purpose, let me say this. You know, I feel like one of the things, it's so beautiful. First of all, let me just say, it's so fucking beautiful to be in a room with you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you for doing it. Thank you for having us, Sal, everyone. It's just like, it's ridiculously beautiful and important and actually like nutritious. And, but also the other thing about like purpose or meaning, I think more and more, the last little while, go figure, I've been thinking, oh, there is like, or becoming more acutely aware of the ways that our alienation from one another is mobilized, like is invented, is monetized. There's a kind of market for our being alienated from one another, you know, and to finding each other like dangerous or like, you know, vectorous or like, you know, like to be wary of. I just want to address it. I just want to say that's a thing. You know, as I see it, there's a kind of concerted effort to make us believe that we are not safe in each other's presence. And I don't believe that. But more importantly, or just as importantly, or part of that, is that in each other's presence is where we find meaning, you know? And that's what's so crucial. Like, you know, when we are not in each other's presence, I mean, you know, like, you think the last 2 years for fucking kids is not, you know, like, how do you explain that, you know? It's like, that shit is fucking bananas. It's horrible. It is a brutality. And it is not, you can't do that to people, children, you know? And so, anyway, I'm just gonna say, like, being in a room with people feels really good, important, nourishing, and it is kind of the reason we are alive, is actually to be with one another, you know? So I do just want to say that, and I want to say that we kind of don't find our meaning, and you know, I'm sort of reiterating something, but we don't find our meaning alone. We find our meaning working things out with each other. We're lost together, and in that we find our meaning. I think that's true.
Agree.
That's my experience,
Agree.
you know?
That's
so anyway.
1,000% agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that advice. Anonymous, thanks for asking this question. You all got a taste of a parenthetical in this book, and for folks who have not read this book, there is also a healthy use of a footnote. I went down 722 different rabbit holes in these footnotes. They were just so rich, and you do such a beautiful job of. It's like a boomerang to outer space. It's a boomerang around the sun. Your footnote, right? Like here's this thing, and I'm gonna go really deep. You have a 2-page footnote.
I have like a 4-page footnote. They're too long. They're too long. There's too many, too long.
Talk about the use of a footnote. Talk about why.
Can I read you a footnote?
Yes. Yeah.
I was recently thinking, I was driving somewhere. I think I must have been working on an essay, and I was thinking in my head, I wasn't writing it. And I was thinking, you know, I do my best. I said to myself, I just say a lot of shit, and then I kind of decide, is that true or not? But I was like, I do my best thinking in footnotes, you know. I do my best thinking in footnotes.
It does feel like process.
See?
It does
you
feel
agree
like
with me.
I do.
You're like, yeah, you do.
And about the driving, and while you look for this footnote about the driving and writing, you know, Toni Morrison, there's like all of these amazing stories of her carrying legal pad and driving on and writing on the dashboard of her car as ideas came to her. So you're not alone. You want nothing bad will happen.
Here's a footnote. Do you have energy? Do you have energy?
I am ready.
This is an essay about, it's a kind of essay about grief, but it's about my father, since my father came up. And it's also about, it's about, what do you call it? Like his tolerance for pain, say. Mm-hmm. And I sort of talk about, you know, there's this little story, you know, father-son shit. There's a little story about my dad, like, you know, kind of playing with me and did something that kind of hurt, and I started to cry, and he's kind of like, what are you doing? And I say that wasn't his thing. Actually, let me just read the sentence. When it came to tears, he was not just do what I say, dude was do what I do. For he could more or less lop his thumb off on the pepperoni slicer at Pizza Hut, or deal with his mother in a bout of paranoia not answering the phone for weeks or months, or get fired, and as far as I knew, still shed nary a tear. Footnote, you still think I'm playing, but I haven't even begun. My man actually tore his left Achilles tendon in his in his late 40s or early 50s playing volleyball at the Burger King regional picnic about 45 minutes away up in King of Prussia, and proceeded to get in his car, a clutch, to drive himself home. The next day after the surgery, because we were like, how'd you do that? And he was like, I just had to like wedge it up there. The next day after the surgery, he had wires like whiskers coming from his heel. Maybe the wires were like exposed ductwork or something, not sure. Or how, despite having a broken foot and a cast up to his knee, the dude carried me on his shoulders the entire day through SeaWorld because little Rossi, get ready for it, refused to ride in the dolphin carriage or walk. Which, as far as I'm concerned, warrants throwing him in with the octopi. Or, as we've already gone over, going to work every single scheduled day for months despite having what looked like an upper respiratory infection, you already know this, but was a rapidly growing tumor on his liver. My father's memorial was held a couple weeks after his death in Uncle Roy's brother's big backyard in Mount Airy. As memorials sometimes are, it was a reunion, and we visited with relatives who we had not seen in years, decades some, like my cousin Heather, who made it up from Charlotte for the service. Some of the sweetest memories of my childhood were of spending time with that set of cousins in Youngstown at our papa's, cookouts and touch football. They were a big crew already, 5 kids, the 2 older boys, Jason and Clay, like gods to us. Though Heather is our age, between my brother and me, and so more mortal. And Joel and Austin were the little kids. At the memorial, Heather looked fit and radiant, and I said, damn, you look exactly the same. Which wasn't true, because the last time I saw her, she was probably 13. But she knew what I meant, and she knew I meant she looked good. And so she laughed and said, well, you know, black don't crack. Because I'm anticipating the possibility that you, dear reader, might be one in a heterogeneous audience, in fact, it is my hope, it is possible that you are unfamiliar with the vernacular phrase, black don't crack, which, in its simplest interpretation, means black people look younger longer than white people. Definitely younger longer than really white people, whom sunlight puts a whooping on. Hard to argue against that.
This is my most favorite footnote, and I'm so glad we did not orchestrate this.
Okay. Parentheses, I'm sorry to perpetuate the black-white binary here, but as far as I understand the phrase, or when I use it, I'm talking about white people. especially really white people. Also, just to the side of the aforementioned, whether it's for melanoma or liver spots or colonial residues, if you feel compelled to carry an umbrella on sunny days, bummer. Important to note that Black Don't Crack is largely aesthetic, referring primarily to suppleness and elasticity of skin, wrinkles and such. In other words, it's about form, not function, which perhaps is why it was in no way a contradiction or paradox to say such a thing while on the mantle no more than 15 feet away in a shiny brass urn were my father's ashes. And though Black Don't Crack's most common usage pertains to melanin's effect on wrinkles, it's impossible for me not to also read it in a way best expressed at a men's league basketball game in West Philadelphia I was playing in around 2006 or so, when a 20-or-so-year-old kid on the other team went to the basket and got tangled up on his way down, rolling his ankle, and sat there a second, clutching his foot, wincing. He rolled on his back like a potato bug, holding the top of his high top. An older player on his team, maybe 25 or 26, walks over to the kid who's groaning in pain and says to him, let's say unsympathetically, what I've come to think of as an analog of Black Don't Crack, real niggas don't stay down. The kid took the advice, retied his shoe as tight as he could, climbed gingerly to his good foot, and hop-limped to the foul line, making both, and stayed limpingly in the game. To say I agreed with this sentiment would be understatement. I felt bolstered, buoyed by the tutelage and by the receptiveness, the obedience of the student. For I, too, was a citizen in a nation of real niggas not staying down. Evidenced by, for instance, just to keep it on the court, just to keep it in the body, when my nose got broken from a flailing elbow going up for a rebound, a dent like a thumbprint you can still see the shadow of, I played another 3 or 4 games without saying a word. Or when coaching at Piscataway and teaching the kids how to attack the basket from the corner, blocking their shots, Ronnie Free attacked the rim and my mouth with his elbow and knocked my teeth all the way down, hanging by a thread, to which I said, nary a word, revealed nary a thing, but just snuck to spit the blood in the trash cans and pry them back upright, hoping for the best. Or to return to the gridiron, to say nothing of getting knocked dizzy and staying in the game, and where the directive not to crack or stay down reveals its intersections with some more obviously nefarious shit. When I tore my medial collateral ligament in college, which I recovered from quickly, i.e. I played in pain with a torn medial collateral ligament, I was made aware of and invited to participate in a study in which the principal investigator wanted to confirm what he suspected. Your rate of healing corresponds to your levels of melanin, i.e. Black people heal more quickly, i.e. Black don't crack. If you think at the time this set off eugenical alarm bells or raised my hackles, you are wrong. I took it as a compliment. I was like Luke Cage with a limp. I was a real nigga not staying down. About which, you know, 1,000 things, but let me focus on 2. First, to bring it back to my father, about whom this footnote is meant to clarify some things and deepen our understanding. Dude could drive 45 minutes with his foot flopping like a fish because he had no choice. Like so many working people, he had to get to work. Sickness or injury or respiratory infection are not exactly choices for the broke or the precariat or whatever word it is we're using these days to mean the profoundly expendable, underpaid masses who used to be in unions and so used to be less expendable and less powerless. To be clear, when I have the sniffles, I stay home. Matter of fact, if I dream of having the sniffles, I stay home. I will put that in the file of my ancestors' wildest dreams. But I bet if I was working at Burger King or the jail or the chicken processing plant or an Amazon warehouse, I'd be less inclined to call in sick because they can fire your ass for anything. How many COVID deaths attributable to the breaking up of the unions? To NAFTA, let alone the absence of universal health care? Better yet, how many deaths, period, attributable to imposed poverty? There's a figure, and I assure you it is much larger and indeed includes and is in some way obscured by the highest COVID number out there. CNN, I'm guessing, won't be reporting on that one anytime soon. And if you were a Black person born in 1945, maybe more. Which is to say, staying down was not an option for my father. And you might imagine I do, that a reasonable parental obligation for such a person would be to convey as much to one's child, me, who, let's call it a result, had the best attendance in the history of Samuel Everett Elementary School. Mascot the Frogs. Among other things, you can imagine it being one in that large and tear-stained sack of tricks for how to keep your black child above ground as long as possible. It's like Jenga, hundreds of balsa wood blocks dumped onto the ground engraved with the following. This is how you behave when you're pulled over. This is how you behave in the company of white people. This is how you behave when they accuse you of something you did not do. This is how you behave when you're obviously the best candidate, but they choose someone else. This is how you behave when you overhear them saying what they really feel. This is how you behave when you know what they'll do to your children. This is how you behave when you understand your death, and definitely your pain, could be useful to them. This is how you don't crack. Which is to say, second, my father, Gilbert Frank Gay, a.k.a. Poochie, who indeed, in my memory at least, seemed disapproving of your speaker, his beloved son, little Rossi Gay, for crying as a little guy. Poochie was simply the inheritor and purveyor. He was simply, again, the messenger of a black prohibition on black cracking, or staying down, which is a perfectly reasonable response to white supremacy's objective to crack us up, break us apart, break us like slaves, put us down. By the way, that us is not only a black us, white supremacy's objective is to break us all apart. Though I suspect the prohibition itself cracks us up. It lays us down. In the case of my father, he drank a lot of alcohol and died pretty young of liver cancer. In the case of his son, read on. Footnote.
What a delight to have some time with you tonight.
Oh my God.
I'm going to ask you one last question.
Yeah.
You open? You feeling okay?
Yeah.
How's your heart doing?
Oh, thank you for asking that. It's pretty good. I mean, seriously, like this feels so good and so nourishing, and this has been like a lucky, lucky day. Incredibly, such a lucky day. Yeah, you know, it's funny. Like I feel, I feel all the things. You know, I feel like pumped, devastated, lost, flabbergasted, lucky as hell, grateful, and curious. I feel really curious about so many things, and I think that curiosity sort of is I try to keep that. I try to keep my heart curious. Yeah.
I love that.
How's your heart?
Thank you for asking me. It's fraught. Yeah. I have a weirdo job. It's a weirdo moment. I think we had this really wonderful conversation that I'll share with you all, where I feel like we as people are constantly being invited to hate each other. And to hate the most different amongst us, right? So as a Latina who grew up in the Bay Area, the people I'm supposed to hate are people in rural Appalachia, or people in Eastern Washington, let's just say there. I'm like nursing a Charlotte of my own in my heart. And constantly trying to come back, but it's hard work because it's easy when the most powerful people tell you that you actually should not be connected to each other. Yeah, so I'm a little bit fraught, but thank you for asking. Yeah. I was going to open with this, but I'm going to close with it. The thing that I really love about you is that you are a reminder of something that Ruthie Wilson Gilmore says, which is where life is precious, life is precious. And I want to thank you so much for being with us tonight. And I want to thank you all, coming out on a Tuesday, Monday night, on a weeknight. Rebecca knows, like, it's 7 o'clock, and I'm like, what time is it?
I know, I was like,
It feels
oh, shit, I missed my
midnight.
flight.
I feel like I'm at a rave right now. It's like a nightclub. They had good music. You can't tell me I wasn't. And so I'm grateful for you all for coming out tonight and for folks online who are watching. Thank you. And thank you, Roske. What a treat. What a treat.
Same. Thank you. Thanks for coming, everyone.